rescheduled meeting, so we don't actually have physical copies of the agenda, although it was posted. So let me just run through the proposed agenda. We're basically picking up from our meeting on December 10th. So this is a continuation of our regular December meeting. Our first item is approval of the agenda. Our second item is out-of-zone enrollment eligibility and number of students. Our third item is a change in February meeting date. Our fourth item is bell schedule modifications for 2014-15. Our fifth item is a capacity committee update. And then we have public comment. I would like to ask if you would consider that if there are any speakers who wish to address the out-of-zone enrollment issue, that we allow them to speak first, so that we hear that before we take action on that matter. Would that be acceptable to everybody? Okay, then can I have a motion to approve the agenda accordingly?
And we approve the agenda?
Second?
Second.
All in favor? All right, great. So on that note, we have a speaker who would like to give this.
Okay, well, thank you. Y'all have heard from me before. I'm Jill Siegel, and I have a current 11th grader and an 8th grader. We are currently zoned for North Spring, so I'm going to be very upfront. My ultimate goal is, of course, because I want my younger son to come to this wonderful school, but I'm also trying to look at all the dilemmas and issues that this governance council is facing. So, and I wish we could just open it to everyone, but unfortunately that's not what we can do right now. So I listened to everything that we said last time about current teachers being able to have their children here, and I would even support expanding that not just from 9th grade, but new teachers when we hire, if they could be throughout the school so they don't just miss it because there's child's a little older. If we expand to the Riverwood cluster, if that's what schools do and we need to be competitive that way to attract the best teachers, then I am certainly all in support of that. I'm happy that we're going to include siblings of newly graduated students. Like they said, if Joey or Jenna had a sibling, that they could come in. And so my request is, if we do make these changes, that we remain consistent with what we have done before, so that the ones who were allowed in the lottery last year could still be considered. I think if we continually change our criteria, that Riverwood doesn't look like we have our act together. And we're finally getting our act together, and we're so happy with your stable leadership. So I think my request would be that the criteria stay the same, if the number stays the same, if we have new kids in the mix, that they either be added to the bottom of the priority or that our total number be expanded so that we can meet all the people that I think everybody really is hoping can get in. So thank you very much.
All right. So on the next item, I did this time remember to bring copies as a starting point at our November meeting. We discussed kind of starting from what we did last year. So this document does not propose any changes. It simply lays out in writing so we can all see it, what we did last year. So this is our third discussion of this matter since we talked about it in November, and then we also discussed it on December 10th. And I did send out a little bit of updated information. Our, help me with this, our new number for next year is
1601.
1601, which is up from 1600, which it was when we last saw Ingerhoff. And so that then sort of indicates that our long-range projection is probably still pretty much on target. So we do need to keep that in mind as we make this consideration. So at this point, what I'd like to do is, since again we've had some detailed or lengthy conversation about people's perceptions about this, is to see if anyone is prepared to offer a proposal to change this in any way.
I have something to also distribute that we should talk about based on what I brought up last meeting, with the idea of taking a broader look at the interests of the school and looking at what our is, and those students who make so many contributions to the school. I think it's, I've been mulling this over for a week now. And so I've consulted with a number of faculty, staff, some parents, and school leadership, Dr. Shaw, Mr. Blackwell, and I've even spoken with Karen Cox about this. And also in producing this, I want to thank Roxy Garber specifically for helping me with a number of the numbers. And Roxy and Sally Page and I sat down yesterday and looked really at some of the criteria for what I'm suggesting here. And Dr. Square also gave me her keen eye in looking at this, so I wanted to thank those folks in helping me develop. And at the bottom of the sheet, you'll note some of the data that I think reflects a picture of who these students are, what these students bring to the school, and a little bit about this proposal. So take a moment to look at it. But what I'm suggesting is that we admit 15 additional students above the figure of 30 agreed upon by the council last year, and outside of those existing categories that we currently have. I think that this is not only in the interest of the school, I think it's in the interest of the county, I think it's in the interest of the community. And looking at some of the numbers that Mrs. Garber, Mrs. Page, and myself looked at yesterday, we see things like the senior class started this year at, I believe, 395. Current senior enrollment is now 389. So what we see are numbers that fluctuate a little bit. And so we didn't, the folks who I've spoken with on this issue didn't think that these 15 would be an unreasonable number to consider in terms of outside the zone. Pass that on to Ms. Davis. So we came up with criteria. Student living outside the attendance zone and not currently registered at Ridgeview or child of an employee meets the current requirements and deadlines for entry into the magnet program at Riverwood. In addition, the student must meet one of the following related to standardized test scores. In addition to the test score criteria, these are grades we want to see in particular courses. And then finally, we'll have an essay and a program of study created for these folks. And again, the data on the bottom of the page, I think, really jumped out at me. And I said this, shared this at the last meeting. That, 56 of the 102 IB diploma candidates are out of the attendance zone. And the numbers that Rox and I looked at yesterday, over a third of the top 50 are out of the attendance zone. 4 of the top 10 are out of the attendance zone. And our star student, that's a student with the highest SAT score, is out of the attendance zone. And he is one of 2 national merit finalists that Riverwood has. So these are the out of attendance zone kids that I think really is in the interest of Riverwood to attract. So I put this forth for the council to consider.
Jeremy, this is awesome. You and I talked a little bit about this, and I appreciate you doing the work. One suggestion, Roxy and I had a conversation about the essay topic, and my thought was, and again, I'm open to debate on this, is that we say finally the student will need to complete an admission essay and put a period there. I don't know if we want to limit ourselves in the topic. I would like the flexibility from year to year to adjust the topic as our goals change, our strategic plans change, and things like that. Other than that, I think this is awesome, and I think it's phenomenally well done.
Dr. Coppis, do you accept that
I do.
recommendation? So we just say we'll need to complete an admission essay, is that the word you used, admission?
Yes, and it's already on the application. It's just the only thing, I just want to don't lock ourselves into a topic that,
So we're,
Is this in addition to the magnet essay?
I'm assuming this is the same one we're talking about.
Every
Right.
student coming in needs to apply for the magnet program?
Right, it's on the
And-
application.
Right, so is this in addition?
No, this is the same thing, I assume.
Same.
Maybe I should-
Yeah, we'll have
Yes.
this be the same thing.
Okay, hold on, Roxy's saying it's not. Well, let's get it straight. What are we doing?
Well, we can make it the same thing, but one of the other things that I want to do with this is look at the program of study. So start mapping these students out as they come into ninth grade. This is what my 4 years will look like.
So this could be in lieu of, because this group you want to focus on, this particular, or something very similar. Because we're.
I think what you're saying needs to be separate, because what's on the magnet sheet is, why do I want to come to Riverwood? So this is, you're looking for a deeper analysis of the student, correct? I just want to make sure it's clear for the students coming in that they know
Yeah,
the
we're gonna-
expectations.
And the other question I have, and I don't know what the protocol, if Ms. Garber can address this, but when you say the student will need to create a program of study, isn't that something done in conjunction with the counselor or with you? I mean, that's, okay. So-
after acceptance.
Right, so that's not a part of the essay. I think that's where maybe Ms. Martin's question is coming from.
Well, one of the things that was going through my head as I was working on this, and again, all these suggested modifications, it's draft,
Sure.
was there has been generally confusion about what programs look like and what do I do here, and so I'd like to, sooner rather than later, get the students understanding what some of these programs are, that they can do here at Riverwood, but also understanding the academic rigor associated with these programs. So I'm not sure that it seems like an after-the-fact kind of thing, and I see how it's sort of a problem here, but maybe we can think of a way on the front end just for a student to know, yes, this is what I desire to do, and I understand what that entails.
And my thought is maybe if the council approves this, maybe that is the internal conversation. It's something we handle internally. But, my concern is in asking an 8th grader, outline, can they do that? Or do they have the knowledge to do that?
Can I ask a couple of questions just about IB in general? So let's say we have 200 applicants for 15 spots. Is it your intention to, if they map their program out, then to have selected within that a balance of their study? Because we know IB go different directions, right? Like different focus areas. So by asking them the focus area up front, is it your intention to try to balance that so lottery doesn't pull out everybody that's got the same focus area, which probably would happen anyway, but why is the program focus area in IB particularly interesting on the front end?
I guess I'm not understanding what you mean by the balance of the focus of study. Is it within the IB program?
Right,
Or
is that what you're looking for, or no, that doesn't matter?
Yeah.
IB student's IB student, it doesn't matter,
What you are.
What track?
right, okay, all right.
Right.
And then,
I'm sorry.
and then one more question, are we required in order to keep our IB funding and program status, is there a number of students that have to be in the IB program? Because if half of the current diploma students are out of zone and they don't get in, what are our numbers gonna look like? And then does that jeopardize the IB status here? Do we?
I think that's an unknown, but I think that's a valid point, and I think that may be part of we want to keep the IB program vibrant. Do we need to continue to find ways for students outside of the attendance zone to participate?
Because we aren't limiting how many IB students we have. If I read this data correctly, the in-zone students aren't necessarily applying for the IB track, the diploma track. therefore the numbers will reduce if we don't allow more out of zone in.
Correct.
Or change that, which we're also looking at.
Right.
Let me just clarify a couple things though, because I want to make sure we're getting this right. What I understand in the way this is worded is that you're actually looking at applicants for these 15 slots who come in with an intent to complete the IB diploma program. And you're trying to ascertain on the front end that they indeed have that interest. Is that a correct statement?
Yes. But there's no way that we can really guarantee
Understood.
that they
Understood. So.
will do that.
Right, so then your intent really was to have, for the students in this category, a separate or additional essay that focused specifically on why they wanted to be in the IB program, versus the more generic magnet application essay that everybody else would complete. So now that we understand that, let's just kind of talk about the pros or cons of having it separated and that maybe being a confuser for students, knowing like which one of these buckets am I in. Although they're gonna have to provide, it looks like, additional documentation as well.
Right, so going back now that I've had a moment to sort through what Dr. Shaw had said, yeah, I think that this is above and beyond. So if you look at number 2, meets criteria, requirements, and deadlines, part of that is the application. So this would be a second essay. So what Mrs. Garber and I mentioned yesterday, this is when, for those of you who have students who have done or are doing the Common App, this is the supplement.
Okay, so Dr. Shaw, understanding that this is intended to be a supplement to determine whether these students indeed have a commitment and interest coming in pursuing the IB diploma program, how would you feel about leaving the language as it is and maybe adding an additional essay?
Well, that's fine, but we need to be careful because it says meet the current requirements and deadlines for entry into the magnet program. And Jeremy, that's why I thought maybe this is the same thing, because the magnet program application does have an essay that says whatever you choose the topic to be. So I just need to make sure that we're clear that if you want to have an additional one, which I think is great.
Yeah, this would then fall under that line, it says in addition.
Yes.
So we almost need like to take
Right.
that in addition and pull it out from number 2
And put it in,
and make it
Yeah.
bold.
Okay.
yeah.
So you gotta do 1 and 2, and then in addition, if you're not a sibling, you're not at Ridgeview, you're not an employee's child,
Right.
you're out of the attendance zone, you need to do all these additional, you need to do the supplement.
And-
Yeah, that was my confusion, so thank you.
And one more question, what is your thinking on the Duke tip student perspective?
What we were thinking in our conversations on this is there are some students coming from schools outside of the attendance zone, I'm not sure if it's always public or private, who might not have some of the other above tests. So we were trying to look at what other externally assessed, because sometimes the grades, which I view as very important, it's harder to make that comparison across schools. Sometimes, you know, for example, Woodward has a reputation of really tough grading. And I'm not sure that there are some other schools that are in that. So how does for example, someone who's at Woodward stack up? If it were only to be grades, stack up against someone coming from another school that might not.
Out of 200 applicants, how many would be a Duke tip student? What percentage?
I would have no way of.
I mean, is that a common thing that most kids that would pursue an IB track go through the Duke tip program?
Yeah, we've
program?
got a
We've
number.
got a number. And I think, Jeremy, one question is, when you say, are these students that were considered for the program or that actually did the Duke tip program? Because I know sometimes kids get the letter and the bumper sticker, but then they don't actually do it. My feeling is if they were considered for it, that's Duke does a good job screening these kids, so I think even if they
Yeah.
got the letter in the mail, I think we're good to go, whether they actually did it or not.
That was our intention,
Okay.
acceptance into the program, whether you did it or not, because as you said, the screening process for that program was good.
So maybe we want to say a student invited to the Duke Tip program.
Okay.
Does that work? I mean, is that the right language?
Prospect.
Acceptance?
Duke Tip
Well, we're all
students.
prospects, I mean, at some point. I was trying to get that, you actually get the invitation, you may not accept the invitation, because acceptance to me implies I've accepted to go. If you're invited, it means they invited me,
Mhm.
which is what you're after. They meet the criteria for the Duke Tip program as recognized by Duke. All
I think if they have that invitation letter that comes in the mail, I think we're good to go. So,
right?
okay, so invitation is great.
Okay, so, I have one other point on that same continuum of conversation. If the student has another standardized test score that provides a national ranking, like the SSAT or something like that, that might have been taken for admission to a private school, could we add sort of a point 4 that said another nationally recognized standardized assessment with a percentile score of 90 or higher?
I would be fine with that. I think one of the things that we looked at yesterday was the SSAT, and we couldn't find any student who had taken that.
Well, they may just not have submitted it to us, but
Yeah.
I think what we
Exactly.
don't want to have happen is people running around panicked if this is due January 31st.
Right.
You know, and they haven't taken the test we list, but they've taken something else that the counselor would feel is comparable. We want them to be able to see.
Yeah, so that would be fine. I don't know what the, you know, and this is where, again, Roxy and Sally helped yesterday.
And
I don't know what the categories for the SSAT are. You know, we have, you know, ITBS, we had what's total language and math total. And then for the ERB, we have the verbal reasoning, reading, and those were the 4 categories we thought of the, I think there were 6 or 8, that we thought would be fine. I just don't know what the categories for the SSAT are.
So maybe if we just said.
The reading and math should be.
Okay,
Yeah.
so,
But
yeah,
I would want to make it generic because it might not be the SSAT, so maybe if we just said a similar nationally standardized test with scores above the 90th percentile in language and math. And then can figure out, like within that, what are the actual components that we want. Because that's what you're trying to get at, right?
Yeah,
The 90th
correct.
percentile in language and math.
correct.
So if we just said a similar nationally standardized test with scores above the 90th percentile in the language and math.
And then no less than an 85th in the other category.
All right, I'll work on that while we see if anybody else has any other comments.
Just one more question. Do you have any numbers on students that participate in IB for certificates and not the diploma program? And out-of-zone numbers, probably not?
Yeah, I would, right, I would have loved to have been able to run
Right,
all of
right,
those.
right.
So, we currently have 102 juniors and seniors in the full diploma program. After I went through the registration process this fall, getting all of those students from all of the IB classes in, it turns out that we have 231 total registrations. So that's juniors, seniors taking at least one IB exam. Now, of that population, I don't have the figures of what percentage would be
Or out-of-zone?
out of zone. I mean, we could run that, but it would just take some, trying to go through 231 addresses to
Right,
figure out who's here.
right,
So, I
okay.
mean, it took us a little while even to go down to the 50.
right, okay.
Confirm, whatever, so.
question regarding 15 additional, so, so we would take the 30, and they may or may not fit in this, and then from the 30, how do we get the 15? Is it a screening process, or it would be the next 15 that we, how does that work?
I did not think, and again, this is something that we all discussed. I did not think that this would be appropriate to have this as the fourth priority on our list and expand the number to 45. Maybe I'm incorrect in my thinking in that, but I think that this is a separate outside thing. In terms of screening, I think the criteria and the application process is going to be a screen in and of itself, and then of course Mrs. Garber and myself will go through these, and then at that point, you know, I'm not sure that I'm expecting 200. I hope I'm not. Because that would take a lot of time to go through. Yeah. So, and you know, we might have to at that point do some kind of lottery like we had talked about last year with the students, and not, you know, in fairness, you know,
The 15
can't say
being
I want,
separate.
well, this kid's got the 98th percentile, I want that over the child that, you know, is the 90th, you know, it's.
So just so I'm clear, so we expand the number to 45 basically, but the first 30 is based on the first 3 criteria, and then the 15 is based on this.
Yeah.
But if you get somebody who fits this in that first 30, say there might be 5, maybe, then do you get somebody else, you know, if we have more than 30 applicants, do you take some who might not fit this criteria, put them in 30, take one out, put it in the 15?
I think you just get 5 more IB students, if you can get them. I mean, if 30 of the 35 end up being IB, great, they're coming in anyway through the process, and then you have the opportunity to get a total of 20 in that class.
But keep in mind, we have no way of knowing that.
Right,
Many
exactly.
applications, but I would say
Right.
that is the parent's responsibility. There are 2 categories of application, is how I see this sort of being on the
Right.
website. There's the magnet application, and you have to meet these criteria, and you go apply for that pool of 30. Or you can go over here and apply for, I suggest maybe this have another name. I don't know what we call it, but, or somehow it's distinguished, and if you want to apply under this category for which Christine will be selected, there's all this extra stuff you have to submit. And if you wanted to, you know, do both, I guess you could, but you couldn't take one of these and put them in here because you don't have all this additional information that's going to be required by January 31st.
Okay, so it's not, the 15 isn't, and it really in addition to the 30, because it happens all at the same time, right? It happens all at the same time.
It is addition, we've got 30 possible in this pool and 15 possible in this pool. Now, last year we didn't have 30, so you may have 28, and we may only have 10 that meet this criteria. But we're saying up to 30 out of this pool, and up to 15 out of this pool, and I do think to keep it clean, there's no, oops, you didn't get into this pool, let's go see if you fit that pool. I think then we get into going back and negotiating, which I think is going to be very dangerous. But somebody could apply for both pools if they wanted to. But I want to go back to.
Why would they apply to both pools, just to increase their odds?
I guess, but I want to go back to one thing that Dr. Coffey said I think we need
But
to make clear.
if you're out of district, I mean, out of attendance zone, you can't apply for a mag.
That's what
Not
this-
unless you follow one of those 30, one of the old criteria.
If you're not a sibling or you're not originally.
Right.
But if you were, and you were and wanted to hedge your bets, you could do both, I guess. So,
Not if you don't allow them to apply for one.
Sure, I understand. It was my understanding, I don't know much about this, but if you apply for magnet, wouldn't you eventually end up in IB?
This-
Not necessarily.
But you might, but to Pam's point, I think we need to be very clear, because people get so confused about this. This is not the only avenue for IB diploma. A student who comes in as a sibling or a Ridgeview student or an employee student has just as much opportunity for an IB diploma. The only difference between the two is whether or not you meet these criteria. If you don't meet these criteria, then the only way you can be accepted is by meeting these criteria. So somehow that has to be equally clear in whatever we put on the website, which I expect to be challenging. But I want to go back to something that Dr. Kopka says that it's in here, but it's not in here, which is if the number of eligible applicants exceeds 15, then a lottery would be conducted.
So we need to have, yeah. Thank you.
Because you're right, I don't think we're legally allowed to, nor would we want to actually go through like a college admissions process and
Yeah.
try to decide the most worthy of the worthy.
Who has the best ITBS score?
Yeah.
Martha, you said the 15 for this additional criteria is considered lottery, they would go through the lottery procedure. Is that what
There's
you
more than
mentioned?
15.
There were, let's say there were 20 that met this criteria, then we draw 15 of 20 out of it. Is
Okay,
everybody okay with that? I think
so
that's what-
just for the purposes of clarity, if I live outside the Riverwood attendance zone and I want to send my ninth grader here, there's 3 criteria that we have traditionally looked at, employee, et cetera, et cetera. Then there'll be, and I think this is to your point, Ms. Greenway, another section on the website that'll say, if those 3 criteria don't work, here is an academic criteria to get you also into the magnet program. Is that kind of the way, does that make sense?
So is it like a 4th criteria?
It is.
Well,
No, it's
it's,
a
no,
second-
not
But
really,
not at
it's
all.
a separate.
Right, not
It's
at
a
all.
second path.
Right, it's a second path.
So it's
If
not-
it's
it's
a
not
fourth,
bullet
then there may
number
not be
4.
spots left.
So it's not really a number 4, but it is a way you can get here based on academics.
Right, right.
But you only have to do this extra stuff before applying for this.
Gotcha.
I just want to point out, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what my discussion about last week was about the number 30, whether that should be 30, 35, or whether we should just, set these groups as eligible. To my knowledge, this body has never voted 30 as the number. Last year, when we
Right.
had this big discussion, our discussion was, these groups are eligible, okay? If that number went to 50, 40, 30, 20, it was what it was, that we wanted these students, and we didn't want a single family to be divided. We didn't want one teacher to get their kids in and another teacher not to get their kids in. But with the right data, I guess, we kind of figured that the biggest the number could possibly be was a number we could live with. So I just want to make sure everybody knows, we never decided 30. That was just
That was
the
a county
that
number
the
they
county
gave us.
came back with, okay? So now the county's telling us, I guess, in reverse, oh gee, now we want your input. We wanted your input last year as long as it was what we wanted here. Now we want your input,
We
and I
want
guess
you to decide.
we want you to decide, I guess, now this year. So I don't want to get too married to 30 until we have that discussion.
So then let's just see if we have consensus for 30 from first set of criteria and 15 from second set of criteria. Because we are being asked to set a number, so just not doing the number is not enough.
And if I could follow up, my recommendation from last week was to give Dr. Shaw or whoever the flexibility to go from 30 to 35 or, some wiggle room in there. Because now, especially if we're asking that teachers' children within our cluster, which would be Riverwood, High Point, and Port Ferry.
We need to go back and consider that though, so we're holding that thought.
Okay.
But if we are,
If we are.
follow that through, the number might be 33. And then who do you not let in? And is that a lottery for the 33 spots versus 30?
Yes.
I think that's Bruce's question. How do you resolve that?
Well, I think what Dr. Shaw has learned, and you speak for yourself, tell us your point.
Well, so I love flexibility. The problem is that the more flexibility, I think, the more confusion you create. I think it does keep it simple and fair to say, we have 30, we've had 35 applicants, so we will do a lottery. I mean, I love the idea of having that discretion, but I also don't want to get in a situation where it appears that I'm picking or choosing. So, I think to stick with 30. And then the other point that you made, Mr. Pifke, that I thought was excellent was, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so please correct me, that, we want to make sure that we have access to kids from everywhere. And I think what Dr. Kopkis has done is really kind of taken a little bit of the randomness out of it and given those kids who really demonstrated their academic prowess to be able to come here. So I think that does alleviate some of that with that extra 15 number as well. But I appreciate the flexibility, and thank you for even mentioning that and trusting me with that. But I'm just concerned that it gets confusing. Well, how come this one got in, how come not this one? And I think we get into a little bit of a nebulous area that's hard to defend.
I got you. Then, I guess, my recommendation then was, we were all so relieved last year when there were only 22 or 25. And the 30, to me, isn't based on any real data that like 35 is gonna explode the library, or the lunchroom's gonna be chaos because of those extra 5. So I guess my question is, why risk it if we know we're close? We're not saying like this, 15 out of 200. We may be saying 30 to 40, but we don't know. And to me, it's unfair to the families. I mean, again, we have a separate, maybe you have. Where do teachers fall in that?
Our teachers right now first.
Okay, teachers at Ridgeview are in with
So,
teachers at Riverwood.
Not yet.
We haven't discussed
Okay.
that yet.
And-
Why don't we talk about that, Bruce, and
Okay.
then let's come back and see if we want to offer an amendment to change the number for category. What I'm going to call for the amendment, group 1. We have group 1 and group 2. Everybody clear on group 1 and group 2? All right.
Can I address the numbers real quick?
Yes, sir.
So, and again, you're always hitting a moving target, and I think that's why everybody you talk to in the district that talks about numbers starts with, well, this is not set in stone. So right now, and Mr. Blackwell, correct me if I'm wrong, we are about 1636, correct? 1640? So our projected is 1601, not including the kids that fall into this area. So at 1635, it's not perfect. We're managing. The kids are being taken care of, which is my most important concern. So I think there is no hard and fast data, and I get your point very well, that what's the difference between 30 and 35. But if you look at a projected of 1601, which is again just a projection, we're currently at 1640. Last year we were 1670, correct? So if you just, and I'm kind of thinking out loud, if you just put a number of 30 to 45, we do have some evidence that we're doing okay with that, because that's kind of where we are now. Do you kind of see where I am?
I do. And my response to that would be, the difference between 30 and 35 is possibly 5 families whose siblings are now divided, 5 teachers who now choose to teach in Cobb County because they can't bring their kids to the school. So those are, to me, they're 5 significant consequences in exchange for 5 students. And that's what I guess where I'm having trouble. I'm just not comfortable with that trade-off. Because those few that get eliminated, it's really big to them.
Okay, so let's talk about the teacher item, which Dr. Square agreed to withdraw, so we can kind of bring it back and start fresh this morning. I do just want to share some information which helps Olivia. I asked Dr. Shaw to inquire of the district about, this was my question, should Fulton County Schools employees living out of the Riverwood attendance zone who wish to send their children to Riverwood High School apply through the magnet enrollment process or through the district employee hardship process? That was my question. Here is my answer. This is from Ingrid Huff, who manages student placement. My opinion would be, if they want to ensure placement at Riverwood based on the magnet program, they should apply through that process. We really can't gauge the transfer process for employees until we see how many applications we receive. In other words, they base that process on the projected enrollment. Since the deadline is February 17th for the employee hardship, I would assume this is after your application date's correct. So what she is saying is, if there's an employee who is employed now and has a rising ninth grader who they believe can meet the magnet process, or actually this is open anyway, so who they believe could meet the magnet application process, she would encourage them to do this first. If this does not work for them, or to, I think the point Pam made, if they actually just were hired and have a rising 10th grader or 11th grader or 12th grader, or if they're hired in May, then they have another option. They go through the employee hardship process. And that child can still apply for the magnet program. They just are not taking one of the ninth grader spots in the magnet application. So we have no way of knowing, how many parents would be employees, because their child might not even be in Fulton County schools right now. But anyway, that is Ingrid's recommendation. It's not either or, and if they don't make this process, they are not prohibited from bringing their child here. There's another process that's open to any Fulton County Schools employee to go through the hardship process.
Martha, just for the minutes, what's Ingrid's last name?
Huff.
Huff. So Dr. Shaw, we'll just go back to you and see what you'd like to propose at this point.
Now, remember you gave us the draft for us to just remind ourselves what the order is. Was everyone comfortable with this order? In terms of, so I want you to consider that a Ridgeview student right now who's being indoctrinated in the NYP philosophy does come after a sibling. We were comfortable with that last year, or are we comfortable with that this year? Because what I'm proposing is a fourth category of considering a cluster, a student whose primary caregiver is a member of our cluster, which is High Point, First Grade, Lake Forest, and Ridgeview, as category number 4.
So you're not saying a teacher within a cluster, you're saying?
No.
That's no, okay.
I'm
so
saying number
that's
1 is
number
Riverwood
one,
faculty.
Riverwood. Number 4.
Number 4
is
is cluster.
Other
Faculty
than Riverwood.
in the cluster.
So it falls, whatever's left after
Because I mean,
employees,
when we discussed it,
then siblings.
I also felt strongly about not breaking up families, sibling
Then
families.
Ridgeview, right.
And you have to consider that we are an NYP school and we're connected. At the same time, I do want to still give our other colleagues in our cluster an opportunity.
And would that not come with hardship?
They could,
Possibly.
but that deadline's after.
Right.
So they could pursue this, and if this doesn't work out, they have a deadline February 17th to pursue the hardship.
So in effect, this year, when we had 30 spots and we ended up with, what, 28, did you say? We would have had 2 extra spots for other cluster teachers, employees to apply to those spots through magnet.
Who would not have considered it previously, because they didn't know this.
I think it's an important element for sure. If we get 35 with these 4 categories, then are we going to lottery for everyone?
Well, what would happen is you take category 1. You take, if you read it, it says at whatever point you hit 30, then all the rest, you would do a lottery from category 2 to fill it. You wouldn't look at 3 and 4. So if between 1 and 2, you had 35, your lottery would be in category 2, and you wouldn't even look at 3 and 4. You kind of like fill up the bucket, and when the bucket gets bigger than 35, you do a lottery from whatever group you're on.
And just in informal conversations with colleagues that are here, we're probably considering maybe there may be 3 or 4 students who are our colleagues here who might be bringing their children. Currently, I think we said it in reading right now.
Sure. Have you had a chance to mention this to Lisa, Harvey, and now Karen? You know, because it seems to me it'd be nice to have a cluster policy, and I don't know, it seems to me that it is a recruiting tool, but is it really when an elementary school teacher, if you're trying to attract somebody that you really want at Hertz Ferry, and they have a high school age student, I mean, could that be a deciding factor? You know, and just as an example, like at Pope, what was your policy? You know, is there some uniformity at all?
Yeah, well, in Cobb, there was you didn't have the charter element. I mean, it was apples and oranges. No, I haven't talked to any of the feeder school principals. Now, you know, my thought is once we make a decision, I could certainly share, I would share that with them as was done last year, but no, I haven't talked to them about what they think about it.
And, I mean, what do you think about it as far as a recruiting tool? When you're trying to recruit
Sure.
the best teachers?
Well, and I told you guys I kind of messed it up last year because I wasn't, and it's my fault, I wasn't really aware of the employee hardship process. I thought once this deadline had passed, that was it. So, you know, the other conversation with Ms. Huff is that even after this deadline's passed, if we hire somebody in July or August, if we have space, employee hardship is still a possibility, which I was not aware of, and that's my fault. So, you know, I think this is very valid. It's kind of reassuring to me that at least if I interview somebody in June or July, I can say there is a possibility through a different mechanism that we get your kid here. So it is definitely a plus, there's no question.
And let me just also add, there is a state law that says if you work in a school system, you are allowed to bring your child to that school system. It does not say school, it does not say cluster. And so what Ms. Huff does is, once our enrollment gets to a certain point, she will close it to even employee hardship. Now, generally, they have been much more lax if it's actually the school where you work versus just the school you pick or the school in your cluster. But there is no guarantee that you can bring your child to the closest school, the school in your cluster, the school where you work. But you are guaranteed you can bring them to the school, the district where you work. So that process kind of it's over here, and I think it generally, you know, works pretty well for employees, regardless of their hire date or the age of their child and when they enter. But this would provide this avenue for those who right now are employed, have a rising ninth grader. So let me just, in the interest of making a decision this morning, do we have, and we're going to go back and vote on all of these items, but do we have support to add as the fourth priority students whose primary caregiver is an employee in the cluster at a school other than Riverwood in 2014-15?
I second.
Is that a motion?
Yeah,
I think that was a consensus before a motion was presented. I think I'm just trying to get the notes right here.
Because we haven't actually put anything on the table, so we're developing our motion, so I think we're good, but as long as we're clear. So I have one other thing I'd like to throw on the table to ask if we would like to have as an umbrella over everything, which is they have to be a resident of Fulton County.
For the cluster?
Anybody in any of these buckets has to be a resident of Fulton County. And I would just propose that for two reasons. One is, there's a lot of legal mechanisms behind the scenes as to whether school districts even allow their students to go to other school districts, which we got mired in last time. But secondly, I just believe that if we're going to have to limit enrollment to students who are in Fulton County who want to come to this school, we shouldn't be offering the opportunity to people outside Fulton County. And I felt differently about that last year because there were some people who had siblings who were told before it was aware the rules were changing that they would be able to come, and therefore they didn't pursue other options. So as a courtesy to those people who were given incorrect information, I was comfortable with that last year. We don't have that situation this year, and I would prefer that we keep this to Fulton County students. So that's my point of view. Any thoughts on that?
So you mean if a teacher?
Not teachers.
Oh,
Thank
okay.
you. Not teachers.
Okay.
So we'd have to clarify other than employees. I'm so sorry, yeah. Employees, they can live anywhere,
Okay.
but the other people have to live anywhere.
So,
You mean the ones that
Okay,
go
so
to
you're not
that
talking about
second?
the teachers.
No,
Oh,
sorry.
okay.
Sorry, but it's.
So this thing,
so,
you mean the students who would apply for this, the second?
We could write it in such a way, with the exception of employees.
So is that in the first grouping or the second grouping?
It's both, in my mind.
Just a little bit of data, and again, we can discuss. We've got several cost reimbursement kids in this number.
And I think several of those are from the city of Atlanta, however, and they would not be allowed to.
I think
Cobb and
Career Cobb,
Cobb.
and CAD, I'm not.
One thought on that is, I'm assuming Cobb has IB in their school system somewhere. And since we're the only IB school, I would hate to exclude Fulton County students' access to an IB program.
At the expense of-
Right, I'd
If
hate
they-
to let Cobb in and then Fulton County don't get in when Cobb's got another avenue.
And that's my point. Other thoughts on that? If we allow employees regardless of residence, right, for the others, we require Fulton County residents. Are we together on that?
I guess, I'm sorry. I'm being influenced by this data, obviously, that Jeremy and everybody was so nice to pull together. So I'm being influenced by that data, but now I'm being told that this data may not be accurate, because if we're gonna change the criteria to not Fulton County, it may not be 4 students in the top 10, it may not be these things, right?
We don't know, because we don't know who's gonna.
Well, no, I'm just saying,
apply.
the data that Jeremy presented about the importance of these students was based on all students, some of which are out of Fulton County, correct?
Out of the attendance zone.
Out of the attendance zone, right,
And may or may not be in Fulton County or they can be.
right. Some of them are out of district,
County.
out
Yeah,
of
some
county,
are out of
Out of county.
correct. So are you supporting limiting it to in-county, even though the data we're looking at shows that some of the students that we're talking about that have added so much are out of,
My preference would be to say that we could invite these people to apply, but if the council doesn't
right,
agree with
that's what I'm
that,
trying to understand, what you,
then
people who
the
worked
council-
hard to come up with this data, what do you recommend or believe? You would like to see.
Well, I had, I had it written as outside of the attendance zone.
Okay.
I did not specify
In the
Gotcha.
how
county.
far outside.
Right.
But Pam, make your point again, because I'm not sure if you clarified what you said.
First of all, Cobb County has IB programs in their schools. We are the only IB program in Fulton County. So for us to allow a Cobb County student to take the spot of a potential Fulton County student that wants IB is probably not the right thing to do. I think the reality is, if we believe we will get significantly more than 15 applications from Fulton County students for our IB program, then it's a moot discussion. If we think we're gonna get 10 from Fulton County and 30 from Cobb County, then it just depends. You want higher level students, but I don't think we want, maybe we could add a caveat. We've got 15 IB spots, and if those aren't filled with Fulton County applications, we would be open to accepting, some others, but I think that gets confusing again. So,
And we probably don't know this, but why would a Cobb County student, if you have that available to you, why would you apply here?
maybe geographically
And
they're
have to
located
pay
in
for
Cobb
it.
and we're closer. I don't know.
Yeah, we don't know the reason for that.
Right.
I do
You're-
think,
Right.
so my point is, Pam, students in other counties, and there are a limited number who are even allowed to come here, but they have other options. Full students in Fulton County do not have other options. And again, my point was, last year it was different because we had people with siblings who hadn't pursued other options, and so they were stuck, and it was as a school's fault because we misled them. That's not the situation now. So, anyway, why don't we just go around? So my proposal is, except for employees, the other categories of students would have to live in Fulton County to be considered. Let me just see where we are on that. So, Dr. Square, do you want to comment?
I'm just trying to clarify, you mean for category 2 and 3?
Category 2 and 3
They
and
would have
group
to
2.
be Fulton residents,
And group 2. Anybody but employee would have to be a Fulton.
and then this as well. Because I really thought this would help bring in those who didn't live there.
Who didn't live in Fulton County.
Yeah, didn't live in Fulton County.
But
That's right.
Carol, let's just keep that clear. Our
Yes, that's
district
very
is our
confusing.
test.
My district's Fulton County, so we do not live in Fulton County. And as a high beat, I have a Spanish teacher, I know where they live, we talked about it, and their addresses, and I know I have at least 3 college students. They will attend this program. And who are contributing to our program, I'm excited to be here. I hate to limit it, but I do understand people's point of.
Well, I don't think
Fulton
it's,
resident.
yeah, I think if we're pretty confident we'll get more than 15 kids from Fulton County that meet this criteria, then is there some concern we won't get 15 kids applying?
I just want the best and the rest.
Right.
And I don't care what you do.
Right.
I want everyone to belong to the district, but
Right.
they don't.
Right.
So is there a way to maybe incorporate what I would suggest you offer as a compromise? That if the 15 aren't filled by Fulton County residents, if these 15 slots aren't filled by Fulton County residents, then it can be opened up to those outside of Fulton County district.
I guess
As
the
long as
only,
there is memorandums of understanding, is that what is required? Correct.
the only hiccup that I think delivers is just the timing of the application. Somebody's gonna have to be willing to apply and meet the deadline, knowing they may not even be considered because the numbers from Fulton County could be high. But if they are willing to do the work to get in line for that second tier, and we can make it not confusing, I don't know that it hurts the process.
So just to be clear, you're proposing only for this one?
So for number 2, I think what Dr. Square and I would like to propose, based on Pam's suggestion, is that the 15 slots are there, and if the 15 aren't filled by Fulton County students, then any available slot could be opened up.
All right, thoughts on that?
You could word it pretty simply, but I don't know if everybody agrees fundamentally in the
Yeah,
concept.
so
But
I'm working on wording, but how do people feel about that idea? You okay?
I support the teachers. If that's
Teachers
what
want
they
the best and
think.
brightest, yeah.
Right.
All right, so the way I wrote this, and I'm gonna go back and read all of this before we vote. I said, if the number of qualified students exceeds 15, this is on Group B, a lottery will be held among Fulton County residents. If additional slots remain, a lottery will be held of remaining applicants.
Does that give you guys what you want?
Student outside
Yeah.
of Fulton County.
Outside of Fulton County. So that makes sure that we don't have the problem Pam and I are worried about, which is that someone from out of Fulton County takes the spot of an
Correct.
eligible Fulton County student. But if we've said 15 and we've got 12 and 3 from Cobb that want to come, we can do that. Okay. All right. Should I review our recommendations and then see if we have anything else, and Bruce, we can think about the number while we're doing this? Okay. All right, so can I get everybody's attention so we're clear on what we're voting on? So Group 1 is rising 9th grade students residing outside of the Riverwood attendance zone are eligible to submit magnet applications only if they meet one or more of the following criteria. 1, students whose primary caregiver is an employee at Riverwood in 2014-15. They have to, if they apply now, they have to know they were going to be an employee next school year. Because if you're no longer an employee after you apply, then you lose your, because I saw you shake your head. So if they apply now and get in, but next year they decide, I'm
But
going to go to
current
Centennial.
employees don't know if they're contracted for next year.
Right, but the implication is if you switch schools, if you decide to transfer to Cambridge, then you're no longer eligible.
And what about the 10th, 11th, and 12th grade?
They go through employee hardship.
Okay.
This is
They
the
have to do
applications
it.
for 9th
That
grade.
you work here and you don't have to leave and go pick up your child in another school because you're already here. Take them to cheerleading or whatever, because they're already here doing cheerleading.
So if you're no longer here next year, then you're no longer a part of our priority. they're not working here during the year your child is attending. So we all okay with that?
That's the
Okay.
way it was last year.
I'm
Well,
just
I think
confused,
to open-
because they're gonna apply in January,
It's the way they've always done it.
right? But our employees now, we haven't hired our 14, 15 employees. And our employees right now, although we have every reason to assume they will be extended a contract in May, we may not know.
So this is the only way to do it though.
I guess all
Because we can't wait.
internally, we just have to handle it on a case-by-case basis, is kind of what you're saying, or I don't know what the words are.
Well, I'm just thinking about the couple of folks who are so the couple of faculty members who want to bring their child here, they're current employees, and they don't know if they're going to be a Riverwood employee in 2014, 2015.
So they would apply with the intention of staying here next year.
Mm-hmm.
If that changed, their student would no longer be eligible.
Okay.
Even if it's no fault of their own.
So you mean they were surplus?
Yeah. What if they're surplus? What if these numbers don't come in? What if our enrollment goes down 50? Then you have somebody who's a junior here because their mom got.
We get
No,
fewer.
no.
If they're
Once
here,
you're
once you're
accepted,
here,
you're in for
Oh.
life.
Once you're here, you're here.
That's county policy. Once you're enrolled in the magnet program, you're in for life. Unless you don't meet the criteria.
Gotcha.
That's another story.
Okay.
Okay, so if your sibling graduates or transfers to another school, you're here. All right, students whose primary caregiver is an employee at Riverwood 2014-15. Siblings of students who live in Fulton County and who are enrolled in Riverwood in 2013-14 or 2014-15. Students who live in Fulton County and are enrolled in 8th grade at Reeseview Charter Middle School in 2013-14. And students whose primary caregiver is an employee in the cluster at a school other than Riverwood in 2014-15. Only students who meet the magnet criteria will be eligible to enroll. 30 slots will be made available. Should the number of eligible slots meeting these criteria exceed the available slots, students will be selected in priority order as numbered above. Should the eligible applicants in a category cause the total number of accepted students to exceed 30, a lottery will be held among students within that category.
Can I make a wording suggestion?
Yes.
I don't want to be here till noon. The part that you said, I believe, in part 4 about teachers in the cluster, can we not just add that? Would it still be accurate to say in bullet number 1, Riverwood, comma, or cluster teachers employed? Because they've dropped in. Gotcha, okay, gotcha.
So they're in order by which they'd be selected.
I
So
got
if
you.
we hit 30
I got you.
after Ridgeview Charter, then we don't take that full count.
I got you. All right.
And Martha, do you know, is Ridgeview still having a lottery? Are they still even accepting Alexander? Because they're way overcrowded.
They haven't voted on how many students they're going to take for next year yet. I would assume that so we haven't voted on the lottery yet. I would assume that it would be similar, and they just take 20, to they did last year and the year before.
Just to review, do we have an idea of how many are eligible of the 20 at Ridgeview?
What time is
Oh,
it?
no,
No.
we don't have it.
I think it's
Martha,
lower
we've
than
got
last year.
targets somehow. I don't want to rush the vote, but teachers are going to.
Yeah, we need to keep going. So if it's not directly related to this, let's hold the questions. Okay, so then group B, I'm not going to read this whole thing, I'm just going to read what we changed. So we'll reference what Dr. Koch has provided. We've agreed that this statement that says, in addition, the student will also meet the following criteria, it needs to get pulled out and be Roman numeral 3. So it's very clear that you got to do number 1, number 2, and number 3. Okay? So we're rewording number 3A3 to say a student invited to the Duke Tip program. Right? Ooh, say that 3 times fast. And then we added number 4, and I give the counseling department permission to wordsmith this a little bit if needed, but what I wrote is a similar nationally standardized test with scores above the 90th percentile in the language and math categories and no less than the 85th percentile in other areas. So that's the spirit of what we mean, right? Okay. In the end, we did not change bullet C, which means these students do have an additional essay that they need to complete. And we added If the number qualified exceeds 15, a lottery will be held among Fulton County residents. If additional slots remain, a lottery will be held of remaining applicants outside of Fulton County. Okay, are we ready for a motion for this?
Sorry, Martha, motion just on that piece?
It's on the whole thing.
Okay, no.
Okay, so go
All right,
ahead.
so, forget the protocol, but I feel passionately that the number 30, which was dictated to us by the county, should be 40. Just,
Okay,
not
so
that I
let's talk about
expect,
going from 30 to 40.
not that I expect
40
it
plus
necessarily to go
15
to
is
40.
55, is that what you're suggesting?
Correct, total.
So in what ballpark number would that bring us with enrollment? The numbers that you gave before, Dr. Shaw?
It would be 16, 57.
And my other basis for that is that they're not always right on their number, to the good, to the bad. And I don't understand actual versus new. Can someone explain that? It says actual number. and then-
Newly adjusted.
That was
So-
the new projection.
So actual was, they were projecting 514 and it's 406. They projected 331 for the senior class and it's now 400. So, what I'm reading that?
Correct. Actual is what we.
So they missed the senior class by almost 70?
He's looking at those
I think the actual is what we have
projections we've got
now.
on.
The actual is what we had at that point, 1709. The new was the new projection, was 1673. So with the additional, it was 1703, and now it's 1701. Where those two students went, I don't know. And our capacity is, what did I tell you, 1325?
But they, okay, but their projections are way off by class, right?
No, it's what we have now versus what they're projecting. Actual is what we had at the time versus what they projected. So anyway, let's just stick to this, because we do need to vote. So we
Well, part of my
have,
point is that we don't really know.
no, we never know, we don't know how many.
Can I hear the current count right now?
How many
Yeah.
students today? Yesterday when I looked at it, it was 1636, somewhere right.
Which includes,
That's warm little raiders that come to school every day.
that includes 28 of the ones we
That's
accepted
everybody in
last
the
year.
middle,
So
right.
that includes the 28 that's,
That's correct.
the category we're in here.
That's correct, right.
So if you extracted those out, then you're comparing apples to apples in these numbers.
And we don't know how many siblings, we don't know how many rich views, so the number could be lower, it could be higher.
All right, so I'd like to just ask for consideration of a slight compromise.
Okay.
If we made it 35, last year we had 28, that gives us some cushion. That makes the total number 50, which is a lot easier soundbite. You know, we've allowed 50 slots, 35 in this category, 15 in grade B. And I will also offer that the governance council before us directed the principal to allow 50 slots that year, and we ended up with 128. We won't go into how that happened. So I think 50, you know, it has some precedent. Would you consider that as an alternative, just for rationale? Or you want to stick with 55?
I would like to defer to the teachers too on the number they're comfortable with based on the classroom.
Yeah, I don't want to be the lone guy out
I
here
walk in
proposing
halls
something.
every day because I float, and so I'm trying to get a feel of how it feels, and then on lunch duty, and right now, I mean, I don't know about anybody else, but right now it feels, you know, it is crowded, but it feels like it's manageable from what I can see. And if we change our schedule and then the lunches are divided, then that may help as well. So I'm thinking 35 is a good compromise.
So just for me, 35 plus 15.
Right.
So that's a total of 50.
Teachers?
Students, weighed in, y'all been really
They'll be
quiet.
on.
I mean, it's not like 5 extra students, it's not all of the class.
I'm just thinking about communicating.
Now, if I can just say this, portion, if you knew that it was gonna be 36, and one of those kids was somebody who really wanted to be here, and it was a family that was gonna be
split up, then you'd probably change your mind, because you then go, oh, I see the human impact on setting this hard number at 35.
But it could be 41. I mean, that could happen.
No, it could
no matter
be,
what
and that's
the-
why, to me,
But
I
and
felt
what you
good about
kind of,
40.
what you kind of wanted
No,
into is the dilemma we struggle with every day. You want to make decisions that are best for each individual kids, but our responsibility again is the entire school. So, and there's
I
that
got you.
balance.
I've made my argument,
Yes,
I'm passionate
Okay.
about not splitting up families, I'm passionate about letting as many kids in here that want to be here as possible.
I think if you've got a number of 50,
And I'm
you're gonna
done.
get
So-
pretty much everybody wants to be here.
All right, so let's just do
Who
a
wants
quick,
40?
let's do a
Who
quick
wants
show of,
35?
yeah, let's do a quick show of hands. Who's comfortable with 35? Raise your hand.
In the first one.
Okay. And who would prefer to go to 40 in the first category? And Donna's fine with 35. Okay, so this is now, instead of 30, it is now 35. We're all clear on that. We've made that change. So we have a total of 50 slots, 30 group 1, 15 group 2. All right. Can I have a motion to approve what we've just described? The
As long as we know how to
recommendation
repeat it.
for the 2014-15 out-of-zone enrollment.
I move that.
Okay, Dr. Square makes a motion. Is there a second? Claire Martin seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed? Any abstaining? It is unanimous. Thank you,
Makes my
Dr.
note
Coppins,
take.
for putting something down for us to
Okay,
respond to.
one question. No, it's a logistical
Too
question,
late.
because what I'm concerned about now is, here's what I would like to see happen. Somebody on this body write this up the correct way and make sure all of us who are in leadership have the same exact verbiage, so there aren't 4 different versions. That's,
I will write it up this afternoon. I will email it to the entire council. And then I will give you until Friday at noon to tell me if I missed something, and then we'll be ready to go. Okay. We do need to change our February meeting date. And Mr. Blackwell, will you explain quickly why we need to change the February meeting date?
okay.
What?
Why do we need to change the February meeting date?
Bill, explain.
Because if we want to, because if you want to give input on our, because we need your input on any potential seed fund money proposal we might take to the district, and their deadline is the day that we're meeting.
So the seed fund, remember, is an opportunity to get funding for innovations we want to implement. Our meeting is February 11th, and that is when the deadline is.
Or maybe it's the 10th.
And we can't
It might
discuss
be
that in the
10th.
January meeting?
What I prefer to do is, if I can have your permission, I'll do another of those doodle polls to check dates for the first week of February. And I think we should announce it in advance.
My question is, can we not discuss that topic in January?
I don't know if
I see what you're saying.
I don't know if we'll be ready to present the ins and the outs, so we'll do that early.
Okay.
We're still working with Crystal and getting some of those
Okay.
details.
So I'll put together a doodle poll for the week of February 3rd, if everybody can promise to respond. I don't know why we need to. Okay, so actually, Pam, if you would just note that that was not an action item. Make that decision. So we've approved, let me just see if I can get a motion to change the date of the February meeting to be determined by a poll result. Joey Weiss, second?
Second.
Dr. Square, all in favor? Okay. Our next topic is the bell schedule modifications. We have about 10 minutes.
I don't know if we can do it justice, Mr. Blackwell. We may need to put that off.
In January. And when are you planning to announce your decision?
Well, we have to have a decision to the district by January 13th. Is that a deadline that I'm aware of? Now, the other option is, and I'm just thinking out loud here, spitballing, we have done this presentation for parents, students, staff. Can we email maybe the PowerPoint to the group, and that will facilitate a discussion in January? What do you think about that?
Our meeting on January 14th.
Well, that's not going to work.
Do we need to have a special meeting on that topic? For those, you know, to get a quorum? 'Cause we're not-
I think it's important that we get it.
All right, folks, if I can get your attention, we're going to add a meeting the week of January 6th. solely for the discussion of the bell schedule. Because our regular January meeting is too late. So I will give you, I'll send you another hold for a meeting, the 6th through the 10th. Is there any willingness to consider a meeting at the end of the day on the 6th?
There's not.
Oh, well. All right, so we'll, because we do need to weigh in on that, and we don't have time today. All right, Mr. Pipke, anything on the capacity committee?
I spoke to Karen, I spoke to Patrick. Patrick was hoping to get me dates aligned with the next steps, referred to as the charrette. But, you know, there have been some rumors flying around that things were changing, yada, yada. He says nothing has changed since his presentation here. One issue that they're having was that they have to have a contractor that's eligible that can demolish a building, which, you know, sits where the new Hertz Ferry is going to go. But he didn't expect that to really delay anything. Obviously, we've all heard that the other building is being converted to the county headquarters. But for the most part, we're on track, and the process that Patrick explained to us in October is still on track.
So hopefully we'll have an update, when we need that first one.
Dates. Oh, absolutely. He was going to try and give me the dates today.
All right, any other business that we need to discuss? All right, everyone have a wonderful holiday. I'm sure everyone deserves more than 2 weeks off, but enjoy the 2 weeks that you have. And we'll see you